Drones hit buildings in Moscow, several downed on approach to capital, officials. Drones hit several buildings in Moscow, causing minor damage and no serious injuries, with air defense systems also destroying several drones on their approach to the Russian capital. Russian officials said early on Tuesday all emergency services of the city are at the scene of incidents. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said on his Telegram messaging channel. Andrei Vorobyov, governor of the Moscow region, said on the Telegram channel that several drones were shot down on their approach to Moscow. It was not immediately clear who launched the drones. Several of Russia's Telegram messaging channels reported that 4 to 10 drones were shot on the outskirts of Moscow and in its immediate region. Sobyanin said that some residents were being evacuated. Russia's RIA state news agency reported that some residents of a building on Moscow's Profsoyuznaya Street in the city's south were being evacuated. One killed in fresh wave of Russian attacks on Ukraine. Ukrainian defense forces said they shot down more than 20 drones during a fresh wave of Russian air attacks on Kyiv early Tuesday, which killed at least one person and injured 4 others when their apartment building was hit and caught fire. Kyiv's military administration said the latest attack involved only Iranian-made Shahed drones and no missiles, as has been the case in most previous raids. A massive attack, Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said on the Telegram messaging app. Do not leave shelters. 1 person died and 4 were injured when debris from a destroyed Russian projectile hit a high-rise apartment building, sparking a fire, Ukrainian officials said. 2 upper floors of the building were destroyed, and there could still be people under the rubble. Kyiv's military administration officials said on the Telegram messaging app. Photos from Kyiv officials and Reuters witnesses showed flames engulfing the top floors of the building and smoke rising from the roof. The attack was massive, came from different directions, in several waves, Serhiy Popko, head of Kyiv's military administration, said on the Telegram. Debris hit several other districts of the capital, including the historic Podil and Pechersky neighborhoods. It was not immediately known how many drones Russia launched, and there was no immediate comment from Moscow. Russia has repeatedly attacked the Ukrainian capital in May using a combination of drones and missiles, mostly at night, in an apparent attempt to undermine Ukrainians' will to fight after more than 15 months of war. Tuesday's strikes were Russia's 17th air assault on the capital this month and came after the city was attacked twice on Monday, including an unusual daytime strike. In a rare acknowledgement of damage to a military target, Ukraine said a runway was damaged and 5 aircraft were taken out of service on Monday in western Khmelnytsky region. Russian state-owned news agency Russian state-owned news agency RIA cited the defense ministry as saying more than 1 airbase had been hit. There was no confirmation from Ukraine of damage to other airbases. Ukrainian officials said most of the drones and missiles fired on Sunday and Monday had been shot down, and President Volodymyr Zelensky praised U.S. supplied Patriot anti-missile defenses. When Patriots in the hands of Ukrainians ensure a 100 interception rate of any Russian missile, terror will be defeated, Zelensky said in his nightly video address on Monday. Psychological warfare. The air attacks come as Ukraine prepares a counteroffensive backed with Western weapons to try to drive Russian occupiers out of territory seized since Moscow launched what it calls its special military operation in February 2022. With these constant attacks, the enemy seeks to keep the civilian population in deep psychological tension, said Serhiy Popko, the head of Kyiv's military administration. On the eastern front lines, Russian paratroops and motorized units were replacing Wagner mercenary units in the eastern city of Bakhmut, according to Serhiy Sheravati, a spokesperson for the eastern group of Ukrainian forces. Wagner began handing over positions to regular troops this week after declaring full control of Bakhmut following the longest and bloodiest battle of the war. Moscow said it invaded Ukraine to denazify its neighbor and protect Russian speakers. Western opponents say the invasion is an imperialist land grab in which tens of thousands have been killed, millions uprooted, and cities reduced to ruins. Russia says it is open to resuming stalled peace talks with Kyiv and has welcomed mediation efforts from Brazil and China. But a top aide to Zelensky said Kyiv's peace plan, envisaging the full withdrawal of Russian troops, was the only way to end the war. There cannot be a Brazilian peace plan. a Chinese peace plan, a South African peace plan, a South African peace plan when you're talking about the war in Ukraine. Chief Diplomatic Advisor Ihor Zovko told Reuters in an interview late on Friday. Call for a Demzi. Another Zelensky aide, Mikhailo Podolyak, wrote on Twitter that any post-war settlement should include a demilitarized zone of 120 km, 75 miles inside Russia along the border. The European Union's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, said he believed Russia would not want to negotiate while it was still trying to win the war. Ukraine's military said an attack on Odessa port had caused a fire and damaged infrastructure, but did not specify whether the damage threatened grain exports. Ukraine is a key global grain supplier, and the port is vital for shipping. It is also one of 3 countries in a UN-brokered deal on the safe export of grain via the Black Sea. Russia said on Monday the grain deal would no longer be operational unless a UN agreement with Moscow to overcome obstacles to Russian grain and fertilizer exports was fulfilled. This month, Moscow reluctantly agreed to extend the grain deal until July 17. Residents of Kyiv high-rise evacuated after falling debris sparks fire. Residents of a high-rise apartment building in Kyiv were being evacuated early on Tuesday after falling debris from a destroyed Russia. Launched air target sparked a fire, said Vitaly Klitschko, mayor of the Ukrainian capital. According to preliminary information, 1 person was injured, Klitschko said on the Telegram messaging channel. Kyiv's military administration officials posted a photo on their Telegram messaging channel showing flames bursting out from a top floor of a multi-story apartment building. The city's state administration, separate from the military administration, said on Telegram that windows were broken and doors torn out in several apartments. Ukraine peace plan only way to end Russia's war, says Zelensky aide. Kyiv's peace plan is the only way to end Russia's war in Ukraine, and the time for mediation efforts has passed, a top aide to President Volodymyr Zelensky said. Chief Diplomatic Advisor Ihor Zovko told Reuters that Ukraine had no interest in a ceasefire that locks in Russian territorial gains and wanted the implementation of its peace plan, which envisages the full withdrawal of Russian troops. He pushed back on a flurry of peace initiatives from China, Brazil, the Vatican, and South Africa in recent months. There cannot be a Brazilian peace plan, a Chinese peace plan, a South African peace plan when you are talking about the war in Ukraine, Zovko said in an interview late on Friday. Zelensky made a major push to court the Global South this month in response to peace moves from some of its members. He attended the Arab League summit in Saudi Arabia on May 19, holding talks with host Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Iraq, and other delegations. He then flew to Japan, where he met the leaders of India and Indonesia, important voices in the Global South, on the sidelines of the Group of 7 summit of major economic powers in Hiroshima. While Kyiv has staunch backing from the West in its struggle against the Kremlin, it has not won the same support from the Global South, a term denoting Latin America, Africa, and much of Asia, where Russia has invested diplomatic energy for years. Moscow has bolstered ties with Global South powers during the war in Ukraine, including by selling more of its energy to India and China. In response to a Western embargo on seaborne Russian oil imports, Russia has been working to reroute supplies away from its traditional European markets to Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who was in Nairobi on Monday hoping to nail down a trade pact with Kenya, has repeatedly traveled to Africa during the war, and St. Petersburg is due to host a Africa summit this summer. In a sign of how Ukraine is trying to challenge Russia's diplomatic sway, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba embarked on his second wartime tour of Africa last week. Ukraine's Zovko said winning backing in the Global South was a top priority. While Ukraine focused on ties with Western partners at the invasion's start, securing peace was a matter of concern for all countries, he said. He played down the prospects of calls for dialogue with Russia made by Pope Francis, who described Ukraine's occupied territories as a political problem. In this period of open war, we don't need any mediators. It's too late for mediation, he said. Peace Summit Zovko said the reaction to Ukraine's 10-point peace plan had been extremely positive at the G7 summit. Not a single formula point had any concerns from the G7 countries, Zovkva said. Kyiv wanted G7 leaders to help bring as many global South leaders as possible to a peace summit proposed by Kyiv this summer. He said, adding that the location was still being discussed. Russia has said it is open to peace talks with Kyiv, which stalled a few months into the invasion. But it insists that any talks be based on new realities, meaning its declared annexation of 5 Ukrainian provinces it fully or partly controls, a condition Kyiv will not accept. China, the world's second largest economy and Ukraine's top trade partner before the war, has touted a 12-point vision for peace, which calls for a ceasefire but does not condemn the invasion or oblige Russia to withdraw from occupied territories. Beijing, which has close ties with Russia's leadership, sent top envoy Li Hui to Kyiv and Moscow this month to encourage peace talks. Zovko said the envoy was briefed in detail on the situation on the battlefield at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, the power grid, and the transfer of Ukrainian children to Russia, which Kyiv says is a Russian war crime. He listened very attentively. There was no immediate response. China is a wise country which understands its role in international affairs.